What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato holding it down with me here in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, wherever you get that, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, all those cool spots. Check out the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VEASAN on the radio. Great one for you today. Steelers star defensive lineman and captain Cam Heyward stopped by to talk to us about his offseason, some of what's going on with his charity over the summer here, and the prospect of the future for a Steelers team that's fallen a little bit behind their standard of handling Lombardi trophies left and right. Plenty to get into with him. But, Dad, we had plenty of franchise tag news yesterday as well around the NFL as some teams had to make it official. The franchise tag deadline was yesterday, and there were a lot of interesting choices that we're going to get to that I think reflect interesting things about the wide receiver market that we've got going on here right now. Certainly the future of the running back position, as Saquon Barkley, it was announced probably the biggest name, at least star power-wise from yesterday, would not be tagged by the New York Giants, who had gone through the contract negotiations with him last year, all those different things, Dad. And now we land with him as an impending free agent coming up at an interesting time for this position, and probably one of the guys along with Josh Jacobs that's going to headline this class.
Yeah, I mean, no running backs were tagged at all here, when even what it wouldn't cost you a ton of money. You know, what does that continue to say about the position, right? I mean, you know, it's a low hit. I think it was 10 mil last year for Barkley or something like that. It would have been like 12 mil this year, but none of them. You're talking what? Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler,
Tony Pollard,
DeAndre Swift.
all these guys. It is going to be an offseason of musical chairs once free agency starts for the running back position. You'll see the same guys but in different uniforms, all of them ranging in age from like 25, 26 to Derrick Henry being 30. So, but I do think not only is, as far as wanting on your team, Mike, would you go Josh Jacobs or Saquon Barkley? Saquon's the bigger name, I get it. Saquon catches, I think, more balls out of the backfield as well. But Josh Jacobs 2 years ago led the league in rushing. I think he's a year younger maybe than, so there's not a ton of age difference. But I know Barkley's going to be the one we talk about because I think a lot of us think Josh Jacobs is going to go back to the Raiders. But, man, Barkley, I think, is going to be a good fit for a number of teams out there.
Yeah, I would probably err on Josh Jacobs. You mentioned it. He's 26. Saquon's 27. Injury's been a little bit more of part of Saquon's early career than Josh Jacobs thus far, excluding this last year. But I think this is also a styles make fights thing, and you're right. I think we're going to end up seeing Josh Jacobs back in the Raiders uniform as they try and make the charge for this season. Saquon Barkley becomes interesting, Dad. You and I have talked about it before on this show. A team like the Houston Texans, a team like the Buffalo Bills, both of whom now are trying to make that charge. The Bills getting over an AFC championship-sized hump in the shape of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals, or even, the team like the Baltimore Ravens now, who's been so hot in the last couple of years, or the Houston Texans, who's going to try and draft off early playoff success last year in year one with a new quarterback. And I think either way kind of underscores, Dad, how we have to level set this conversation and why I don't actually think it's the most interesting thing about the Giants to come out of this past weekend of headlines, because what we're talking about here, if Saquon Barkley does go to the Houston Texans, that's a great fit, especially because he's not going to be relied on as the bell cow. There's a lot of people that looked at him in a Giants uniform from 2 years ago when the Giants made the playoffs and outperformed expectations and Daniel Jones earns this contract. Most people looked at that team and said, well, that was a running-based attack. That team was led by Saquon Barkley. And now you're going to look at him going over in whatever uniform he's in next, whether it is a team like Houston or a team like Buffalo or anyone we've mentioned, and no, he's clearly second fiddle to a passing offense led by an incredible young quarterback.
Yeah, I'm probably more interested in Baltimore on what they do, because this was the top rushing team in the league last year. Gus Edwards, a free agent. J.K. Dobbins, now he's been injured.
Yep.
He's a free agent. You had Justice Hill there. We know what Lamar can do, but you wonder what they're going to do there. Will they pick up one of these guys? Because as we mentioned, it's not going to cost you a ton of money. And remember, by next week, next Wednesday, I think when the new league year begins, that's when teams have to make sure they're under the cap. But while it's not going to cost you a lot of money, so that one, while I think Saquon in Houston is a phenomenal pickup for a young team, a young and up-and-coming team, and what he can help bring that team, I'm really most interested in what the top rushing team in the league is going to do at the running back position.
Yeah, they bring back Keaton Mitchell, who before injury last year was the lightning in that backfield. Home run threat every time he touched the ball, and him back there with a quarterback like Lamar Jackson was an awesome combination. I still think, and I will continue to say it until I'm blue in the face, all of these names are great, but you mentioned the biggest issue for the Ravens running back room historically for the last handful of years has been injury. Bringing someone in with Saquon Barkley's injury profile would be a little bit unnerving to me. I think that the Baltimore Ravens probably looked up watching the Combine this weekend and watching our boy Audric Estime run a little bit of a slower 40 time than anticipated and breathed a big sigh of relief because, man, if you could get a back with his physical standing in that backfield alongside Lamar Jackson, alongside Keaton Mitchell for a pretty manageable number, I'm sure, being drafted, we know, outside of the first round. There's not a first-round back in this crop of running backs. Now, all of a sudden, you got a young pairing of backs as you can allocate money elsewhere because you got all that money going to your quarterback. So I'll continue to try and speak that into existence, mostly because selfishly, I would love to see our large adult son, Audric, end up on a wonderful team in an organization like the Baltimore Ravens.
Well, I think that's the issue. Is you have these young guys who can come and make an immediate impact, and that's when it comes to, on top of the injury situation, that's the issue when it comes to the running back room, and that's why they're not getting paid. That's why you have guys like Josh Jacobs, Senior. You mentioned the guys. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard, DeAndre Swift. But of course, Barkley is the top of this conversation. I want to bring in the odds because we talked about the Texans. They are the favorite at -200. But let's have this conversation. The Chargers are next at +275. Then you have the Dallas Cowboys with the same odds as the Giants, guys, +550. Just imagine the drama.
This would be the most Jerry Jones move of all time, right? To look out at the sea of running back candidates and go, well, everyone knows this guy's name. He seems like a big star. We got a big star. Now kiss. Let's make the perfect marriage happen.
Well, I'm wondering... one of the more intriguing, we know Jerry Jones' MO. One of the more intriguing things to me is, what is Jim Harbaugh going to do? What road is he going to go down? What is he going to do in the draft? They've already started clearing some cap space, making some cuts. As Claudia mentioned there, Austin Eckler going to be a free agent there. Who does he bring? Because we know the kind of offense he likes to run, right? While you have a quarterback that can air it out, you have receivers that can air it out. There's talk of him maybe bringing in a Brock Bowers possibly at the tight end position. We'll see. But we know he likes to run the ball. So that will be an interesting one to me. As you mentioned, Mike, there are no first-round running backs. There are good running backs out there, but you're going to get them, a little later in the draft, past the first round. But is Harbaugh going to be involved or invested in one of these veteran running backs because we know he likes to play a little ground and pound?
Oh, I mean, you already heard Greg Roman out here talking his love language. He said, yeah, Justin Herbert's great. Imagine him with a running game. Like, it's not what we all want to hear, which is, well, imagine him with a developed downfield passing game. No. Greg Roman, who last time on Dragon Ball Z was the man who'd seemingly kept a lid on the Lamar Jackson-led passing game that just exploded to the tune of an MVP for Lamar Jackson. Now he's looking back at here and go, no. We're going to do the thing that I like to do. So, I'm not sure, Dad, profile-wise under there, because when we think of a running back there, a lot of the Greg Roman stuff was a little bit more under center, a lot of pistol-based run stuff, some of which we saw from the Chargers during this time with Justin Herbert and with the running back crew they had in there led by Austin Eckler. But of this group right now, like, hey, listen, Josh Jacobs would be the belle of the ball for almost any of these guys. But I think for the Chargers, the beauty of that is so much, and again, this is the complicating factor. You've got a quarterback in Justin Herbert who's mobile enough to be somewhat of a part of this rushing attack. So much of what we think of with Jim Harbaugh coming in is, hey, you're going to have the offensive lines a lot sturdier than they're used to there, and how much that benefits whatever running back you're going to put that, or hell, we've seen the 49ers, Jim Harbaugh's old home, make stars out of different running backs before Christian McCaffrey each and every year, having a different guy as the leader while Kyle Shanahan's been there. So I think there's a lot of possibilities for everybody involved here. But to your point, it's going to be a game of musical chairs. And when we're ultimately, none of these players, at least I think south of a guy like Josh Jacobs, depending on the quarterback situation, are going to be asked to shoulder too much of a load. That's why, Dad, I don't think this is the most interesting headline for the Giants, who obviously are going to have to replace some lost production from Saquon Barkley. I think the most interesting headline from the Giants comes from Rich Eisen. the other day. Rich Eisen, longtime NFL draft host over at the NFL Network and the Rich Eisen Show, said on his radio show the other day something that he heard. He always does the rumors that he hears, the top 5 ones coming off the combine each and every year. And this rumor about the New York Giants, to me, is far more fascinating considering where they stand this offseason. Take a listen.
Number 3 of my top 5 rumors I heard at the combine is the Giants are absolutely done with Daniel Jones.
Wow.
Done.
Wow. Absolutely done.
Done. Might have to play him this year, but that ain't it. And they feel that ain't it. The words I heard at the combine multiple times, 2 words were buyer's remorse.
Buyer's remorse, Dad. So this becomes really interesting for the New York Giants, and I'm curious, does this change any of the way you think about their offseason this year? They sit at number 6 in the draft right now, so they're in striking distance of some things. Daniel Jones, contract-wise, is in the second year of a 4-year extension that he signed that would carry a $69 million cap hit this year if they were to cut him or anything like that, but only a $22 million hit next year. So the get-out year is after this season, but you've got him under contract ostensibly for 1 more year the way the money was structured in this one. So how does this change the way that you view the Giants offseason?
Well, listen, they are in a position to make a move if they want, but they have, obviously are going to have to give up assets because, the first 3 teams are looking for quarterbacks as well, unless you're satisfied with the 4th quarterback on the list. So we all wondered this at the time of the signing. Hell, you go all the way back to the draft. You and Jason Fitz and Mina Kimes' reaction when the Giants picked Daniel Jones at the quarterback position. Everybody was kind of stunned a little bit, and then even more stunned when they gave him the deal they gave him last year. And you mentioned the numbers. Do you want to live with a $69 million cap hit and do it this year? We know Denver's living, well, you can spread it out, like Denver spreading out their $85 million dead cap hit with Russell Wilson over the next 2 years. Do you want to just do that and eat it now or wait another year until, as you said, it's a $22 million hit? So you have him here. Are you starting over again? That's the thing. You got Joe Shane, the GM, and Daboll, the coach. Are their seats starting to get a little warm after that really good first year? Is it starting to go that way a little bit? Do you start the clock over with a young quarterback after this year? Because I agree. I think Jones is going to be on the roster this year. I think it's just too much of a hit to have him off the roster. So do you start over with a young quarterback again and kind of restart the clock? Does that help you as a coach who's been there a few years or a GM that's been there now for a couple of years? Does that help their job status, or as we've seen in the past, you just move on? Oh, we got a new quarterback and an old coach and a GM. We'll get rid of them and bring somebody in to help out and bring along the new quarterback. They're in a tough spot. And listen, they did it to themselves, right? All they can do is look in the mirror. This was their move that they're in. They know the deal. They know all the numbers that you said. They knew what those numbers were going to be. So they put themselves in that position. And I think in a lot of situations like this, Mike, with a guy like a Daniel Jones type of quarterback, you do the deal and you cross your fingers, right? And hope it works out. And in this case, it hasn't worked out. So it puts him in a very, very difficult position.
And we know a large part of that was injury, right? The guy only played, 6 games last year before we went through all the experiments with very Italian backup quarterbacks and the Tyrod Taylor of it all. A lot of that was dictated by that, because going back to when they signed the deal, this is a lot like when we had the Russell Wilson conversation yesterday, when at the time of the deal, we all kind of understood it. We all had a very different opinion of Russell Wilson when that deal got signed with Denver. We thought they were only a quarterback away. And looking at the Giants, they were coming off a season when they made the playoffs. They won a playoff game. They looked like a team that was on the rise. Brian Daboll was coach of the year. And we thought, okay, this deal made sense for both sides because, again, for Daniel Jones, it looks like 4-year deal. It looks like big money. And in actuality, it's a 2-year prove-it deal still for the Giants. I thought everybody kind of won with this until you got to the point with injury and the fact that last year, I don't think they developed the rest of the roster on offense the way they needed to. Bringing in Jalen Hyatt as your only real dynamic receiving threat added to the offense at that point seemed like it wasn't doing enough. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road on this conversation, Dad, is you've got great options here. Like, I think the Giants are actually in a really good spot with their team because you can go two routes. You've got the 6th overall pick. Like you said, you're within range. If you really love one of these prospects at the top of the draft and you're Brian Daboll and you really are out on Daniel Jones, you can say, well, we can move up, we can work assets to try and go up and get our quarterback and worry about the rest later, and also have a guy that we can play right now so we don't have to force that quarterback into duty right away. Or on the other side, you can say, all right, we got a great opportunity at the 6th pick in the draft to have our pick of the litter, by and large, of one of the top 3 receivers in this draft and add a weapon to that room, or the other big elephant in the room with this Giants team from the last couple of seasons, adding to offensive line. You went and tried to pick Evan Neal out of Alabama the other year. That's been a disaster so far. I will continue to caution people. Andrew Thomas did also not have a great start to his career before now ascending to Pro Bowl status over on the left side, but you're in range for a Joe Alt, an Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. If you want to fortify the rest of that roster around the quarterback position, go one more year with Daniel Jones and try and build as fertile a landing spot as you can for whoever's going to be the next player there if you truly are bought in. So I actually think the Giants now, if there's any truth to this, and we know we're in silly season, this could be a smokescreen. They could be trying to get teams to believe that they're quarterback hungry, so they'll jump up and maybe they can trade back. All that's on the table, but it makes the Giants fascinating players in everything that's about to happen in the next 50 days in the lead up to the draft.
Yeah, I agree, because right now you look at the Giants and you say, look at the Giants' talent. What do you think? And I think the word would be, if it's a word,
Yes.
Right? I mean, Daniel Jones has done nothing to set himself apart. He's been basically, played 16 games 1 year. He's basically throwing a little over 10 touchdowns. He's not a high touchdown guy. I think his rookie year, though, he threw 24. But other than that, it's been 10, 11, 14 in that area there. Saquon Barkley, as you mentioned, nicked up again with the ankle, average under 4 yards a carry. Your leading receiver had, I think, 60 receptions. Wan'Dale Robinson. So it's just all So where do you start for them, right? Normally you have to start at the quarterback position, correct? So is that what they're going to do, even though they're going to have to live another year with Daniel Jones? But they've got holes to fill, and if you move up to get that quarterback, then you're giving up assets that you could use to fill some of those holes to get, to move on from your team. Because that's where they are right now. They need help in more than a few positions. Going up to get a quarterback is going to take some of that away, because it's going to take some of your assets away. And then you're taking another chance. You roll the dice with Daniel Jones, and right now it's not coming up very well for you. So are you going to now you'd have to make that move while giving up assets to do it, to try and jump up and get a guy that you want.
Yeah, Dan, ultimately, I think that's where I land is you've got too many problems for the Giants on their roster between, we've seen the linebacker level on defense, certainly offensive line, the wide receiver room, the weapons around the quarterback position, to, in my mind, be able to bring in a young quarterback and expect that to go well. Because as we've talked about, I think more and more in recent years, hey, where you land and how ready they are to receive you goes a long way in deciding which of these quarterbacks are going to succeed and fail. Most of these guys, most quarterback prospects, even the generational ones, aren't built to just bootstrap an entire organization and pull them out of anonymity on their own. It takes a village. And so I do think ultimately the smartest move for the Giants this year would be to use that 6th pick on either a pass protector or a receiver. We can have that debate like we did for the Bengals years ago all over again if we want to. I'm always going to err on the side of offensive line because I am of beef and I like to support beef. Yeah. But I do think going that route, letting it go one more year with Daniel Jones, and hey, if you get one of these guys that falls, one of the guys in the Michael Penix Jr., the Bo Nix reigns, and you want to take a flyer on one of those guys, or just say, hey, we're going to go all in on this year. Brian Daboll, if you feel like you've got the job security to do this because the human element of this is real, then you push all your chips into the table on Daniel Jones. You take one more crack at a really talented young guy, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think you make the pick at 6. And while I love the O-line as well, and it's a deep offensive tackle group, it's also a really deep wide receiver group. I think you get weapons there. The wide receiver position has changed over the last few years of being, you need a couple of years to assimilate to the league, to now coming and being a standout right away. So that's probably the route I would go.
Yeah, Dan, I agree. There's a lot of change going on in positional value across the league. Coming up next, we'll show you how some of the franchise tag decisions made yesterday actually can give you an indicator of where the winds of change are blowing around the league. Next on GoJo and Golic.
GoJo and Golic, the franchise tag window closed yesterday as of 4 p.m. and some of the biggest names are off the board for free agency next week. Let's take a look at some of them. One of the names that really stands out, we talked about him yesterday, Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. You see Michael Pittman Jr. over there for the Colts, Brian Burns at the top of the board for the Panthers, and then for my Patriots fans out there, Kyle Duggar, that was a transition tag, which guys, if you want to touch on that a little bit more, I know there's a lot of questions surrounding that one.
Yeah, you know what? I think relationship terms in sports are always tailor-made for each other, right? And when you look at a long-term deal, it's like a marriage proposal. You guys go down there, you walk down the aisle, you do your thing. The franchise tag is, hey, like, we're dating, I want to make it official, but I'm not ready to put a ring on it quite yet. The transition tag, Dad, to me always seemed like an open relationship. Like, I love you in most circumstances, but if you get a better offer and someone's really willing to go above and beyond my effort, I'm willing to let you walk away there. Does that sound about right to you?
Well, it's exactly what it is. For those that may not know what the difference is, the exclusive franchise tag is just that. I mean, you can only deal with the team that tags you. Nobody else can talk to you, anything like that. The non-exclusive tag is the same as the exclusive as far as money, top 5 average, or I should say average of the top 5 players at that position. Another team can make an offer to you, but your original team has the right of first refusal to take that. And if they don't, that team you sign with gives the team that franchised you 2 first-round picks. So it's costly, for sure. And then the transition tag is the softest of all of them for Kyle Duggar and the Patriots. It's the average of the top 10 at your position. So his number compared to all these other guys is way low. The other guys are only from 19 to 24 million. His is under $14 million. Another team can make an offer to him. The Patriots have the right to match that offer. If they do not match that offer, Duggar's just gone. That team that signs him doesn't have to give up any picks at all. So, yeah, it's the softest of all of them of saying, yeah, we kind of like you, but you know what? If you find someone who likes you better, we're probably not going to fight for you.
And to stick with the relationship terms, there is a possibility some of these guys are traded, like the Chiefs talked about doing with L'Jarius Sneed, or they could be signed to long-term deals if Josh Allen and the Jags want to stay together a little bit longer. Those are possibilities as well. So curious if maybe those 2 guys or somebody else sort of stood out to you, GoJo.
Yeah, so you're right. There's a lot of machinations still to come with all this. I think most of us expect the L'Jarius Sneed situation because, hey, they didn't tag Chris Jones. Most people expect a long-term deal to get done with that, and that's probably going to eat up a lot of your money at a space where, hey, defensive backfield, Chiefs feel like we've drafted pretty well there. We've got a good stable of young guys to be able to absorb this, and we got to work around the margins because we got a $500 million quarterback, and those are the things that have to happen when you make those decisions. So I think that's certainly interesting, and some of the other movable ones there, Dad, but I do think in general there's some like big picture ramifications that come from a lot of the decisions that we saw made yesterday. Like take a look at pass rusher, for instance, like you mentioned, Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen, and we probably shouldn't stop calling him that because he had 17 and a half sacks last year.
Exactly.
He was awesome and would have been one of the prized free agent pass rushers on the market, but now you get him, you get Brian Burns of the Carolina Panthers, who could be another tag and trade candidate there as well, both at least placed for the time being. Which means all eyes, Dad, in my mind, move to a guy like Danielle Hunter. We talk about things that are maintaining their value in the NFL. Having a dynamic pass rusher on the edge, still worth its weight in gold no matter what scheme you're playing or no matter what the opposing offense is running. And right now, the Minnesota Vikings didn't use their tag at all. Kirk Cousins couldn't tag him. Danielle Hunter and his deal that he signed last year, that 1-year, $17 million deal with the Vikings, also had a stipulation where he couldn't be tagged this year. And now, Dad, this is great for him if you're looking out and saying, all right, you took the other 2 great guys off the market here. Yes, Danielle Hunter's 32 years old, but in his last 4 healthy seasons, it's been double-digit sack years, and 3 of those 4 years, it's been more than 14 and a half sacks.
Yeah, there's going to be some, like him, D linemen that are going to make out in this. I think the running back position, while the running back guys are going to be free agents, they're not going to make out as much. They're not going to get that big money. I think the wide receiver position, I think you really get to the, I keep using that term, that's kind of where you are with free agent wide receivers that weren't tagged as well, and you have a great class coming in of wide receivers in the draft. So I agree. Danielle Hunter, I think, is in a really, really nice position. And remember, with all these tags, this doesn't go into the season. as far as trying to do a deal. This is about the middle of July, usually July 15th area, where you have to sign a deal, or the player, if they're going to play this year, plays on that number and that number alone. So for all you fans of these teams, you have till the middle of July to see what's going to happen with these players. And some players always threaten to sit, which I never believe they're going to do, not sit the entire season, and they'll be guaranteed that one-year deal if they don't get a deal done. But yes, there are some going to be some on the tangents of this, some winners, and I agree with you. I think Danielle Hunter is going to be one of them.
Yeah, I think that's stock up there, and given what the marketplace could look like, I'd imagine Minnesota's got to brace for the potential of losing him. A lot of that's going to go based off of what happens with Kirk Cousins and if they can retain him and how much money they're going to have left over from that, the Justin Jefferson deal. There's some legs there, but I think in general, Danielle Hunter in a good spot. Dad, you mentioned wide receiver. We saw Michael Pittman tagged here, T. Higgins tagged here. So the two biggest names on the board, the two youngest guys involved in this, Mike Evans also re-signing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, means that the decision for the Jacksonville Jaguars to tag Josh Allen leaves Calvin Ridley exposed now and entering free agency. And to your point, Dad, I'm going to be fascinated. I think this quickly becomes a buyer's market in terms of wide receiver talent, because Calvin Ridley, when healthy and in the right circumstance, can operate as a wide receiver one. We saw last year with the Jacksonville Jaguars, hey, when everyone else is hurt around him, when there's no Christian Kirk and all this stuff, and you've got Trevor Lawrence banged up, yeah, maybe he's not able to lift you up as much. But, Dad, I know we keep going back to this, and there's going to be a couple of teams that get mentioned a lot because they're the haves, and everyone's going to want to be a part of them, but especially if all of a sudden it becomes a buyer's market and you're a player that's not seeing a robust market dollar-wise for your services, do you start looking at opportunity? Because, man, if I'm Calvin Ridley, that Baltimore Ravens situation looks pretty great right now, right? Odell Beckham Jr., I believe, going to be a free agent as well coming up, so he could be on a different team. You've got Zay Flowers there, who's your bona fide speed threat. And now, man, if you throw in Calvin Ridley over the top of that with what the Ravens' passing attack became last year, everybody should start to worry.
Well, I think that's kind of where it's going to be, Mike, because I don't know about you, but I don't see a monster contract out there for Calvin Ridley. So what do you start making your decision based on? Is there one team that would pay you a lot more that you want to jump on? Or is it, I'm not going to get a lot of money, so what's the best team to go to? And Baltimore certainly would be one of those teams as well. Another team I'm interested to see what goes on, especially on the defensive side. The Dolphins are just, Emmanuel Ogbah, Xavier Heyward, Jerome Baker. They've released all these guys on the defensive side of the ball, a team we all talked about as being close, being right there, and, just not getting it done, obviously, in the playoffs, losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. So what's their move? They got to pay Tua. So what are their moves on the defensive side as well? So there's a lot of interesting things as, again, the league year starts next Wednesday and we see some of this money go out. I'll be interested, going back to what you said, where Calvin Ridley falls in all of this, again, because of such a monster wide receiver class coming out. And we're not talking just for the first rounders of the wide receiver. This is probably one of the deeper classes out there. If wide receiver free agents like a Calvin Ridley kind of get lost in that shuffle or don't get offered as much as they think they may because of that.
Yeah, do you get some teams that are desperate that might have to spend resources elsewhere? We talked about the Giants in need of receivers, the Jets with Aaron Rodgers coming back, got to go all in on this season. Hell, the New Orleans Saints, once you committed to bringing Derek Carr back, kind of got to revamp some stuff around there, and Calvin Ridley could go a long way, but it's always going to be easiest to go, well, look at the Chiefs, look at the Ravens. They have clear needs at this position. They're really good at football. Why wouldn't you want to go play for them, even if it's on a short-term deal, and try and continue to maximize your opportunities there? The Dolphins one, Dad, becomes really interesting, and all the signs there seem to point to, hey, they're just getting their money in order because they know they're going to have to pay Tua Tagovailoa here, and seem prepared to do so when you let a guy like Christian Wilkins walk on the defensive side of the ball, in addition to linebacker, in addition to Xavier Heyward in the secondary there. It all seems to be going that way, and man, oh man, that's a ton of pressure on Tua. You let all this other talent walk out the door, basically saying, we believe the quarterback can be the guy that lifts us through that. Pressure makes diamonds or it bursts pipes, and we're about to find out which is the on the order for the Miami Dolphins here soon. Coming up next, though, let's talk about the pressure on one organization based on Victor Wembanyama's first season in San Antonio. How much does this change the timeline for the Spurs? We get into that next here on GoJo and Golic. took a little while. I'll admit I had my doubts the first half of the season. Things were starting off a little bit slow. Not quite what I expected for someone hailed as the greatest prospect since LeBron James. But we have finally arrived at Victor Wembanyama take season. They have finally arrived on our doorstep. I unwrapped them. I couldn't even wait to get into the house, and they have been stellar every which way here. Let's take a look. As the guy who has now become the odds-on favorite to win Rookie of the Year in the NBA, going up against Chet Holmgren, his fellow large giraffe son, has inspired a lot of interest over the last couple of days here. And Dad, Claudia, I want to start with this one from Dad, our former friend, or I should former colleague, Ramona Shelburne, still current
there you
friend.
go.
Love Momo.
Yes.
I was amazed because we've gotten to this point now with Victor where he's been undeniably great. He's done some incredible things. The numbers have started to back it up until last night, very inconsiderate of them. Things have been trending even in a positive way for the Spurs in terms of winning basketball games, upsetting teams like Oklahoma City and what have you. And it all prompted this discussion on NBA Today yesterday, where Ramona Shelburne brought up the timeline in San Antonio, what it had been and what it might be now. And I want you guys to listen to this and tell me if I'm crazy, because I feel like I heard one thing and the entire internet yesterday decided to read or hear another.
Victor's here. Victor is ready to win. And I know they have this idea that they're going to take 2-3 years and find the right core and they're all going to be on the same timeline, but I don't know how patient he's going to be, because when I watch him play, that man is competitive. He wants to win. And how long do you give him, Malika? Year, two?
A year max.
Because I don't think he wants to sit here and be at the bottom of the lottery standings.
So for you guys here, did that sound like Victor Wembanyama is going to pry his way out of San Antonio and go play somewhere else? Or did that sound like, oh, Victor Wembanyama and this team now just need to rethink the way that they're allocating assets?
Yeah, it's like any other player. He wants to win, and he's that talented to where he should be playing somewhere where you can win, but, he's a rookie.
Well, she did say that we don't know how long his patience is going to be, and he may want out of there.
She didn't say he'd want out of there. I will not put those words in Momo's mouth.
Wait a minute. Are we parsing words here? I mean, at the end of that comment, she said she talked about his patience, and if his patience is wearing thin, what's the other option if your patience is wearing thin with a losing team? Is you get yourself off that team. So I'm not criticizing her for it. I think she's right. I've said this before. I said, how long is he going to be cool on that team if that team doesn't get good? Greg Popovich, one of the greatest coaches out there, coached a dynasty there, but he's up there in age. He doesn't have much longer. Is he going to be around for this team to build to where it is? So I agree with what she said, and I'm not saying he's going to leave, but she did talk about what would his patience level be if he has the ability, and we know players in the NBA have all kind of power if they don't want to be somewhere, and where is that? And I think that's what Ramona was saying is, where do we put that line? Do we put that at 2 years? Where if he doesn't see, where they are this year, obviously they're bad. Where are they next year? As he start thinking, he's got another year and then 2 years of a club option. But as I said, we know the power of players. So I don't know. I think she was saying, will he get a little antsy if this team isn't good in a year or so?
See, I just read all of that as this sounds like the team is going to have to reimagine or retool what they thought the timeline was. Because I think there was some people that had questions, especially like I mentioned, the first half of the season. This didn't look like it was the immediate impact that a lot of us thought Victor Wembanyama was going to have. Right. It looked like this, all right, it might take a little bit longer, and now he started to supernova the back half of the season. And so I think it's just this idea that if you had a runway lined up for the Spurs, hey, you've got to up that timeline because you should want to maximize this now. They mentioned in a longer version of that clip, there were other NBA players. They said Dame Lillard, when he was going through his process, had some interest in San Antonio because of Victor Wembanyama. Like, you're going to get free agents that look at a place that normally isn't sexy for free agents because you've got a 7'4" Frenchman who can do some of the freakiest things that we've ever seen.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. And I agree with everything you said, especially about how he's playing right now and how will that team look to free agents to come there and play with him? My only thought was, if they still aren't good, if that doesn't happen and they're trying to build through the draft, how long does it take and what's his patient level in doing that? But I am interested in the offseason of how well he's playing now is to see what players will say, yeah, I want to come down and play with this guy.
Yeah, and this whole conversation is kind of underscored by a sensitivity of small market fans who look at places like ESPN and others and think, oh, they don't want our team to have this star. They want to have him on one of the coastal elites and do something like that. I always think it's somewhere in the middle. Like, unfortunately, the Spurs overall have not been a great basketball team this year until recently, so there hasn't been a ton of great stuff to talk about on the court for this team. Victor Wembanyama is the most overwhelmingly interesting thing about them. And listen, there is a fear from some of the rest of us who aren't in these markets of seeing things like what happened with Mike Trout, like where you have him on a team. And listen, I know the Los Angeles, technically Angels, even though they're hardly a team that feels like they're of Los Angeles, aren't necessarily considered a small market, but in Major League Baseball, we don't think of them as one of the haves, and we've watched one of the greatest baseball players of all time toil away in anonymity in a place that has never given him an opportunity but wants to see the postseason. That becomes some of the fear. But no, I don't think that this particular instance was someone in the national media trying to pry Victor Wembanyama out of the clutches of this organization and rip him away from this franchise that we've watched and we've seen perform at a high level. The Spurs have been one of the haves largely during my NBA lifetime, and I just thought a lot of that got misconstrued. But what doesn't get misconstrued is what you brought up, Dad, and Steven Jackson, one of the co-hosts of All the Smoke, brought this up the other day, that he believes that if the colors on the uniform were different, we might actually be going even higher with our conversations about Victor Wembanyama.
I think he would be the best player in the league if he was on a team with two other stars right now. We will be calling him the best player in the league because his team will be probably at the top of the East or West, and he'll be having these same stats. So if he was on a better team, we will be saying he probably is the best player in the league right now.
Well, and I mean, this is like the Chet Holmgren conversation where so much of Chet's Rookie of the Year campaign was based off the fact that, yeah, you're on a much better team. And so not only do you get the association with winning that usually helps with awards, Dad, but you also get a little bit of relief. Like Victor Wembanyama's maybe got one other guy on that team you can consistently count on for some relief, especially offensively. You look at Oklahoma City, you've got an MVP candidate in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You've got the rest of Lou Dort and the rest of that lineup offensively and defensively that provides help in other places to spread the floor. So there is certainly that part of it. Yes, even the best players require a little more around them to fully shine the way they're capable of.
I guess the way I would put this to wrap this part of the conversation up is I don't think we're going to see great players do what Dame Lillard did. Hang out in one place and say, I'm going to try and win here. If it's not working in San Antonio, I think Wemby is going to get out of there. I don't think you'll see that decade loyalty of, I'm going to just stay here and I know we're going to win here eventually, even though they didn't win and now Dame is in Milwaukee. I don't see that happening anymore where it lasts that long. So I don't think it's anything other than to say San Antonio's on the clock of getting a good team or a better team to a great team built around this guy in the next year or so.
But I think that's something they're capable of doing. I think the conversation needs to be, yeah, this San Antonio team, who is the next person that they go after? Who makes sense to put alongside Victor Wembanyama here? Because the one thing I'll say about Vic is publicly everything we've seen about him, dude seems like he's about that life and also understands and has talked since the jump about his appreciation for Greg Popovich. I think this is a markedly different conversation if Greg were to retire out of nowhere or do something like that versus if you got him there. That's such a valuable asset to this young man at this portion of his career that I think this is a lot more of the makings of a Giannis Antetokounmpo situation where could there be a little bit of public pressure or pride every once in a while to make sure things are rolling along at the proper speed? Sure. But ultimately, I think this is a guy that sees the lineage of this franchise, the coach at his disposal, and the opportunity here as something he absolutely wants to sink his teeth into and make happen here.
That would be the perfect comparable, right? Of Giannis wondering if he's going to stay there. He does. They end up winning a championship. So it paid off for them. I'm sure that would be the route they'd love to go in San Antonio, is to build around a guy like Wembanyama and the season he is having. So that would be the model to look at, to try and keep him and build around him.
Speaking of trying to keep marquee talent, coming up next, the strangest sales pitch for Caitlin Clark to stay in college basketball popped up yesterday. Next.
Welcome back to GoJo Golic. Caitlin Clark continues to win games when it comes to records. But listen to this. She's Big Ten Player of the Year for the third consecutive time. But guys, that's not really that shocking when you're averaging over 32 points, over 7 rebounds, and basically 9 assists a game. So I'm not shocked. I don't think anybody else is. Now, the conference tourney starts up today. Her and her number 2 ranked team won't play until Friday, though, because they go straight to the quarterfinals. But let's talk about everything that Caitlin Clark is doing, the impact that she is having, not just on women's college basketball, but I think basketball, period, because people are trying to get her to stay in college hoops. They're like, no, please don't go to the WNBA, which she is going to after this season. But there's interesting NIL deals being floated around to try and convince her to stay. GoJo, there's one that came to the top of mind for you.
This was fascinating. There was a report yesterday via, I believe Puck was the original outlet. I'm trying to find the author's name here, but it got aggregated by Awful announcing that there were collectives led by certain television partners, including Fox, that were talking about putting together an NIL package to convince Caitlin Clark to stay in college. Why, might you ask? Well, for the Iowa-Ohio State game where Caitlin Clark broke Pistol Pete Maravich's scoring record, they averaged 3.4 million viewers on Fox for that game. It was higher than both TNT NBA opening night games this season and higher than Victor Wembanyama's debut on ESPN earlier this season. So these are box office big-time sellable numbers that have gone forward for this young woman. And so this thought that we have an unusual source now for this NIL deal, and we remember we had the whole disingenuous Darren Ravel conversation about how, oh, she's taking a pay cut to go to the WNBA, even though we have now seen plenty of reporting that she hasn't taken a dollar from the collectives at Iowa, that all of the money she's made in NIL have been through brand deals that are going to exist even when she goes to the next level here. But, Dad, this is the economy of Caitlin Clark now, where we've seen, and we've heard this happen from the individual level. We talked about this with C.J. Stroud last year before he went to the draft, this idea that Ohio State, behind the scenes, there were rumors and reports that they were trying to put together an NIL package to convince him to come back and do one more year as a Buckeye. This thought that TV partners would look at this box office gold and say, you know what, we could just broadcast WNBA games where she's going to be and put that on TV with plenty of stars, or we can potentially rumored to be putting together some sort of package to keep her in college playing at Iowa here. What'd you make of this, Dad?
Yeah, I make that as you know, people making fiscal decisions, you know, and trying to. And now this again, this part of it with Fox never got to Caitlin Clark, and never got close to materializing. But it's people thinking outside the box of ways to help them. Again, you know, this is Caitlin. Caitlin Clark is this entity right now. And when you're as great as she is, everybody's finding a way to use you. Now, when I say use you, I don't mean you get used and nothing for it. You get paid for it. But how can we monetize Caitlin Clark? She's going to make money, but how can we monetize that? And that's what Fox was thinking. If we can keep her in college basketball, is there a way we can monetize that by having her be, you know, in college? So I get it. That's what you do with a hot commodity like that. Look at what's going on at the next level. She signed a deal with Gainbridge, which is a financial service a place that is a partner, one of the big partners with the Indiana Fever, the team she's going to go to in the WNBA. So it's going to continue for her in a sense of how can we monetize her and pay her. But this would have been a new one if it was an actual network covering games that found a way to do it.
Oh, I mean,
as we said, it never really materialized to anything, so we never really got any of the how you're going to do it. But it's just a thought of, okay, here's someone that is gold around her. How do we monetize that?
Well, I mean, this is rife with huge conflicts of interest if this was actually.
Sure it is.
And this is, listen, so it's John Orend at Puck was the guy who put out this original article and reported on the idea that a specific NIL deal for Clark to not go to the WNBA would have Fox executives as part of a collective to potentially get this done. Now, Dad, as you mentioned, this never happened because much like a lot of situation with guys, nobody actually ever even approached Clark about this. So
right.
Men not talking to women in settings where they've got something on their mind, not overly shocking. But I think with this, Dad, I mean, if you were another team in the Big Ten, you'd have to be pissed hearing this, right? I mean, this is a massive competitive balance issue. If there was really any truth to the idea that television executives that broadcast the rights to your conference and others in that area were trying to bring back the best player in college basketball to play again on that team, when everyone else in the Big Ten, I'm sure, is getting ready to breathe a sigh of relief that she's getting up and gone.
So in my mind, this is the way it went, Mike. Somebody at Fox had the idea, hey, is this possible? You have a meeting about it, and then maybe they did have that common sense person in the room, like you always say you need to be in a meeting, that just says, you know what, this ain't going to work. There's conflict of interest. For all some of the reasons you just said, it's not going to work. But that doesn't mean you can't all get in a room and think about it and say, you know what, is there a way to do this? And you throw out ideas, you throw it all up against the wall and see if there's any possibility. And as we saw, there was zero, because they never even got to an idea enough to approach her about it. So I never mind somebody thinking outside the box, can you do this? But I think it never materialized for the reasons that we're saying, that at the end, at every thought process of doing it, there was a roadblock of why you shouldn't do it or couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, because it'd be wildly out of pocket. And it comes on a day where, oh, by the way, Michael Mulvihill, who's the president of Insights and Analytics over at Fox Sport, actually tweeted out a lot of these rating numbers and said, Caitlin, it's not too late to go for your MBA. You can never have enough education. Like, it's a ha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like, Come on, what do you think about this? So, I don't know. It's a testament to the kind of mania that's developed around Caitlin Clark. I did think there was an interesting offshoot to this conversation. I heard Bomani Jones on his podcast, The Right Time, which is an awesome podcast everybody should listen to, bring up the idea that he thought that college basketball and the people covering it were doing a bit of a disservice to the sport by not using Caitlin Clark's popularity to then draft on more of the popularity of other stars in the sports. I mean, we knew what LSU coming into the season was, with Haley Van Lith and Angel Reese returning off a national championship squad that had Kim Mulkey. You know, this is a game that in recent years has far outpaced its male counterpart on the other side with the terms of stars and household names in the sports, especially that have developed in the tournament. Dad, my only, not even pushback on that, but I think reframework is, in college basketball overall right now, we've got a difficulty, I think, in getting national media to buy in on the regular season and fans at large to be as interested in the regular season, because it becomes such a tournament sport. It's such a big tournament. It's such a great sell March Madness, this awesome time of year for casual fans to dive in, that anything that you can get in the regular season drawing people in. Hell, we were at ESPN when Zion Mania was going on at Duke. It didn't feel like anybody else played men's college basketball that year. We had Zion cams on, dude. We had digital platforms entirely dedicated to his performance on the court. All of that to try and sell college basketball's regular season as something people would want to continue to watch. And then you get to the tournament, you expand the view, and everybody else comes into play. And I think for the women's game, a lot of that will still hold true this year, where, yes, Caitlin Clark has been the entry point, the gateway drug for a lot of people, but there's a lot to like when we get to the most popular time for college basketball coming up this month.
Well, yeah, and I think we'll see that once the tournament starts because of what we had last year. This person, Caitlin Clark, and her team knocking off the undefeated South Carolina Gamecocks, and the Angel Reese story, and LSU winning the title. So I think once we get there, because we haven't talked, it's all been Caitlin Clark. South Carolina just won 2 seasons in a row being undefeated in the regular season, right? I mean, but we're talking Caitlin Clark. And I think the future's bright. We've talked about it. Number 5, USC has Juju Watkins, a freshman. Number 14, Notre Dame, Hannah Hidalgo, a freshman. So I think names will keep going. But I think this was a kind of out-of-pocket year, Mike, where you had one person breaking basically every record, not only in women's basketball, but in basketball overall. So the spotlight was going to continue to stay on her. Now all that's done, I think the tournament's going to be a monster for the women yet again, because now the only thing missing off Caitlin Clark's resume is a national championship.
100%. You've got that going into it. You mentioned South Carolina sitting at number 1. Stanford and all the stars on that team, led by Tara Vanderveer. Ohio State at number 3, USC sitting at number 5 right now. UConn and Paige Beckers lurking inside the top 10. Strap in and get ready for it. Going to be a fun one as we turn the calendar to March Madness. Coming up, though, as we talk free agency in the upcoming NFL season, let's visit with Steelers star Cam Heyward next.
GoJo and Golic. The Steelers are reportedly not too interested in the quarterback market. Mike Tomlin at the end of last season said Kenny Pickett will have that QB1 role, but he promised there would be competition. However, according to reports, they're not too interested in Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, Baker Mayfield, or Justin Fields. So it's likely Pittsburgh's hoping for new offensive coordinator Arthur Smith to unlock something in Pickett in year 3. The next Steelers quarterback is just one of the topics the guys got into with Steelers D-lineman Cam Heyward during their interview this week. Take a listen.
All right, very excited for this one because I get to read, I think, one of the better resumes in the NFL right now. He is an all-pro. He is a captain. He is the co-host of a podcast, Not Just Football. And he's also the 2024 Walter Payton Man of the Year. But in addition to that, Steelers veteran defensive lineman Cam Heyward, who joins us now, was also my welcome to the NFL moment. My sip of coffee in the NFL began with Cam Heyward coming around on a tackle stunt on the interior, and all of a sudden having one of the hardest, biggest heads in the NFL run right into mine and make me realize, I don't know if I'm going to be long for this world. So, Cam, good to talk to you and good to be in a situation where I don't have to worry about blocking you anymore.
Thank you for having me. I didn't know you were going to lead off with that welcome to the NFL moment, but didn't know my head-to-head contact was going to get the best of you.
Listen, I think given the very strong lineage of your head, that's probably something I have in common with a lot of people who've had to try and get after you on the football field. But no, Cam, we're glad you're here. And I first and foremost wanted to say congratulations. The last time I saw you briefly was at the Super Bowl on the Walter Payton Man of the Year win for you. That's obviously such a unique honor. And I think for people on the outside, and maybe help them understand why that matters so much in a sea of all the accomplishments you've had, to have that now added to your resume forever.
Yeah, to win the Walter Payton Man of the Year was my 6th year. And it's not just recognized for the work you do on the field, but the work you do off the field. And I've seen guys do so much work, like Andrew Whitworth, who's, he's built a field back in L.A. For a lot of great kids. You see the work they do with underserved communities. And myself, we've collected suits for young men in honor of my dad, and we call it Craig's Closet. And so we find creative ways to get back to our community, but to be recognized and nominated and to win, it's a truly honor. I don't even feel like worthy because there's so many other guys that are worthy of it as well.
And it's great when it can all be shown, because there are times when obviously fans think of players as robots and just what they see on Sundays, but so much more when you guys are given a platform to what you do for the good. And speaking of giving a platform, something that's certainly different from, way back your dad's day and certainly my day as well, is all you guys with podcasts now. You all got the equipment, everybody, kind of jumping into the media while they're still playing. When did that start for you where you thought, okay, man, players are doing this, I'm gonna jump into this?
Well, I feel like Golic, you kind of like got us started on that. You were the brainchild behind it. You looked at the older guys who, Howie Long and a lot of the guys who were football players who went on to do radio. We were just appreciative and watched. And then from afar, I've always had a curiosity of it. And so through it, I've had some fun, got to interview some cool people, got to tell my side of the story, and I think letting fans relate to us a lot more than just having our helmets on is really cool. And just showing a different side of my personality.
And like you said, getting to tell your story from your perspective, I think is really interesting at this juncture, especially for you. Heading into this offseason now, you're one of the established veteran players at one of the premier franchises in the NFL, but that doesn't make you immune to a lot of the outside noise. I saw you tweeting at the end of February about your reaction to some of the comments from Steelers fans about you and the desire for you to retire because you've been hurt. How difficult is that to hear those kind of things, even if it's just a minority of the fan base, for someone like you who's given so much to this organization?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like you get injured one year and then everybody jumps off the ship, and it is what it is. But I don't think I'm ever immune from being criticized, and never will. And that's part of the game we play. But now I get to have an opinion on that. Now I get to, disagree or agree with what's said. And I get to use it as fuel to the fire. That always adds to it. And, I know coaches don't like the bulletin board material, but I know the players do. So it definitely gives me a lot to circle back on.
And what a day and age when you get the keyboard warriors out there typing in things about you, things that they would never say to a player's face, but now they can type it and hit send and feel like they're the tough one in the room, when in actuality, what you have done, 13 years, 11 years of seasons, 15 or more games, your consistency has been absolutely incredible. I know you went through the injury this past year, but how do you feel physically? It's a lot of years being on the interior, getting a lot of hits.
As funny as it sounds, I felt like I've taken care of my body pretty well. My first 2 years, I didn't really play that much. So I got a chance to really learn and get better at my craft compared to other guys who were thrown in there right away. And I know in our game, if you're a first rounder, you don't play right away, you're looked at as a bust. But for me, it was a chance for me to really grow. And so I think that's benefited me in my career and allows me to play at a longer age.
You've now played so long that you're helping the Steelers navigate a really interesting time as a team, where it's a time of transition, the end of Ben Roethlisberger's tenure there, when for so long the Steelers had a ready answer at quarterback, a franchise with so many great ones. The standard is something that's imprinted all over the building there. And we know for you guys, that's about winning championships. So as you guys approach this offseason, what do you think has to be the next step for you guys to get back to not just making the postseason, but being a team that can compete for the Lombardi again?
I think it starts with consistency throughout the team. Whether it's the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball. I know we made a lot of changes on the offensive side of the ball and coaching related points, but having that consistency where we're able to balance each other out and show up for each other. If the offense doesn't score, does the defense make sure they're accountable and not let them score points. So you got to play complementary football, and I don't think we do that as well. But I'm looking forward to a lot of the changes we're making right now, really addressing that and allowing us to be a full, complete football team.
I talk a lot about veterans in the locker room. When you go to younger quarterbacks, how veterans feel like, because you're going to have to grow with a younger quarterback, and you only have so many years in the league. Now you're way past what the average is with the amount of time you've been in the league. But do you feel that way as well as a veteran, that so much every year counts, and at times you don't want to really waste that year or take that year of letting a young person, or especially at the most important position, grow the way they need to?
I know there's going to be, valleys, and, there's going to be mountains they got to grow and climb through. So you got to be patient in that remark. But for me, there's a sense of urgency. As I'm an older guy in this league, you want to maximize everything. You want to get a chance to win a Super Bowl. And I'm just constantly, reiterating that and letting people know that, you can't wait to say, you're ready for the moment. You got to go out there and seize it.
Cam, in your mind, the organization has reaffirmed publicly a lot their commitment to Kenny Pickett, who was, first-round draft pick out of Pitt right there on the south side with you guys. Is that something where, do you think there needs to be veteran competition brought in? Do you guys still back Kenny fully on that team? What's your thought process on the quarterback spot there?
I think both can be, beneficial to us, whether it's, Kenny, us having support behind him. And then, I think competition breeds greatness. And at my position, you got to have competition. At every position, you got to have competition. That's how you get better. That's how guys get pushed. Even when Ben Roethlisberger first got here, it wasn't like he started right away. He had to earn the position. And that competition, we got to have a little bit, especially after last year. I thought Mason Rudolph did a pretty good job coming in the last 4 games and really showing that competition. Whether they bring him back or not, there has to be competition in that quarterback room.
looking at, we talk about quarterbacks and young quarterbacks. We got a draft coming out where there's probably going to be about 5 taken in the first round. And again, the combine was overtaken by those that didn't choose to do things. Now, looking back, I believe your combine, you were hurt. I think you had an elbow, so you only did a couple of things. But what do you think of the players today and their decisions on what they want to do at the combines?
I think it's I understand the business side of it, that you don't want to do it, and you don't want to lessen the product of what someone's willing to draft you for. But the competitor in me is like, I think the best player in every draft should be the guy who competes in everything, the guy who goes out of his way to show that he's the number one guy. Because then that's the guy who's not going to back away from a challenge. That's the guy who's going to, be the forefront of every competition, who's going to go into and say, hey, I got to win this game. And so I'm looking for the guy, whether it's this year or next year or the upcoming years, that is like, yeah, I might be the number one guy, but I'm going to prove to you that I'm the number one guy. I'm going to go out there and seize that moment, rather than saying, oh, I want to hold on to the information and control the narrative that way.
Certainly a competition, you've mentioned it over and over. That's why the Steelers have been what they've been. And I think especially so under Mike Tomlin, who's obviously set the tone for the long time in that building. But Cam, for the first time that I can remember, there were legitimate questions coming from people on the outside about Mike Tomlin and his future with the Steelers. And we saw at some point him even react to that a little bit, leaving that press conference a little early when asked about that after a loss. Did you guys feel that on the inside? Did you see that or see Coach dealing with that on the inside for you guys internally?
It was more of a head scratcher for us. We got to that moment and, we were kind of like surprised, because Mike T had never indicated or acted any other way. The one thing you can always appreciate with Mike T is his consistency in the way he addresses us and the way he's open and transparent. And so as much noise as we were hearing on the outside, we were almost confused because it wasn't coming from the inside.
And you being such the veteran you are, I would imagine have a great relationship with Mike. Did you chat with him after that or by the end of the season about, the season and what went on? And just as you said, it was kind of a head scratcher. Did you ever discuss that with him?
I think I've made a couple of jokes to him, just poking at him and just seeing how he would react to see if I could get a rise out of him. But that's just me and our relationship. Like, as an older guy, I can, push the boundaries and say, hey, Coach, how you reacting to the news today? They said you're about to leave, and he's having fun with it, and telling me it's a bunch of jargon that doesn't even matter. So he's always got a way of spinning everything around.
I think your position, especially along the interior of the defensive line, is fascinating in the modern NFL right now, and I think is getting talked about a lot more. So what's your experience been as the league has spread out more, as we've seen the offenses expand and the defense kind of have to adjust to match that? What's it changed about, especially defensive tackle and interior defensive line play?
Well, when I first got here, it was you were either a 3-4 end or you were a 4-3 D tackle. And so now it's become more of the hybrid and more of how many different positions can you play, because it allows you to play different fronts. And, you can play an over front, you can play an under front, you can play a 3-4 front. You could even play a bare front. And so it allows, the guys that get drafted higher are the guys who can have the position flexibility. But, I love the way our game's evolving, where we get to showcase a lot of these guys because they're great athletes. And I think sometimes we got lost in not recognizing guys like Justin Smith and Brett Kiesel and Aaron Smith. These guys took on multiple blockers, were able to get sacks, they were able to cause a lot of havoc, but because they were defined as a 3-4 end, it wasn't the sexy position. People stayed away. But now you have guys like Chris Jones, you have guys like Quinnen Williams, Javon Hargrave, Jeffrey Simmons, and Aaron Donald. These guys are just they have different body types, but they're so flexible in their positions that you look out there and you're saying, oh man, this is the future of our game, because they're just dominant up front.
to become that versatile, did it change the way you prepared? Like I'm sure as you're getting ready to start training in an off season from year one to now on how you're preparing to play a season?
I think the older I've gotten, I think one thing I can always rely on was my foundation of knowing what I can do and where I needed to be. As I got older, I got a chance to know where I can take chances more, and I can, the coach always says, if you're going to take a chance, make the play. And so, for me, it was more me reiterating that to myself and saying, I can take the chance. I'm going to make the play. I'm just going to make it more often than not make the play. And that allows me to take more chances here and there. And, I don't want to stay coming under the block, but, set the edge, be able to come back is, something you want to be able to do time and time out.
All right, a strong foundation.
Just for people to understand.
Go for it, Dad.
Yeah, just for people to understand, that's what we're talking about, going underneath the block, right? I know doing that and going, my God, I better get back outside and make the play, man.
Yeah. You've been chewed out in plenty of meetings before. He's like, you do this, you better make the play. And so I've gotten chewed out a bunch, but I've definitely made more plays than I was supposed to.
I was going to say, as you mentioned, a lot of those great defensive linemen along that, certainly a part of that group, like you said, made way more plays than I'm sure you've gotten chewed out over the years. You mentioned that strong foundation. We talked off the top about your foundation and the work you're doing there being the reason you ended up as the Walter Payton Man of the Year. I know you've got some events coming up, and that includes a softball game in the summer. So I have to ask, especially of your teammates right now, who's actually good and who goes out there and falls flat in their face when it comes to the charity softball game?
Oh, man. Well, Kenny was amazing. Kenny, I felt like every time he went out there, he was hitting home runs. The one player I am so disappointed in the way he played was my little brother, Connor Heyward. He crapped the bed. He was not he was not a good player out there. It was just I was kind of embarrassed that I even brought him out there.
Wow. Damn. Your shots. That's the tough part, I'd imagine, playing with your little brother. I mean, just in general with that team experience, how difficult is that? Is that the first time you guys have been on a team together at this level at any point?
We're separated by 10 years, and so having the chance to play with them has been really cool. Seeing how he reacts to different situations, seeing how I would have reacted in the situations are cool. But it's I definitely just try to be a lifeline for him. He's entering his third year now, and so seeing him grow and having this opportunity to play with him is really special.
No, it's incredible stuff. So by the way, I want to make sure we get this out there. When is the charity softball game? How can people get involved, and what can they do to help support your foundation?
Yeah, so it'll be in July. We don't have the exact date yet, but it has always been through the Washington Wild Things. That's the minor league team in Pittsburgh. And so we do a great job of, we would love for, any of you guys to come out, Golics. And take part. But, we raise money for my foundation. We have a good time. We play about 6 innings of the softball game, and then we do a home run derby. So whatever you guys are up for, we'd love to have you go.
Oh, all right. There we go. Dad, how you feeling about this? I know my baseball game, it's been a while since I dusted it off. What do you think you still got in the tank?
I have a feeling I would make your brother look like an all-star.
You know what? All the more reason then. Cam, we'll try and get out there, and we'll make sure my dad's there to make your brother look better by comparison. How about that?
The worst part about it is my brother actually played baseball. I didn't even play baseball, so he doesn't have anything to stand on.
Absolutely.
Cam, you have to understand, when you get to my age of 61, you do things to not get hurt anymore. Because the last thing you want to do is be rehabbing at 61.
Just bunt.
That's it. There we go.
Strictly buds. Cam, hey, man, congratulations again. We can't thank you enough for all the time today. Enjoy the off season. Enjoy all the fuel that you get to add going into next year. We're excited to watch you cut it loose again, and hopefully a lot more good stuff for everyone out there in Pittsburgh.
Thank you guys for having me.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Is it more football you want, like me? Well, the NFL is saying there's a possibility it'll go from 17 to 18 games. This is not something that will happen in the near future, but Mike Florio says there's a lingering sense that the NFL is still wanting to get to an 18 regular season game. Now, the current CBA expires in 2030, so it's likely going to take a while until any of this really happens, but I'm curious what you guys think from a player's perspective, because I'm a fan. I've never played the sport, so I just watch you guys go out there and get hit. But I can't imagine moving this. I know it's just one extra game, but an 18-game season, what it does to the body and the mind from a player's perspective, GoJo, what is your thought on this?
Well, and I mean, we have to remember, too, how much of this we've already seen pop up, right? Mm-hmm. They've gone to a 17-game schedule already. They expanded the postseason, so there's been even more added there. And, Dad, listen, you were part of the NFL's union for a long time. You understand that the bottom line of this is, at least here, when we talk about this stuff with college, and we'll get into what's going on with the Dartmouth men's basketball team in a little bit, we're dealing with college where there's no union, so when they want to add playoff games, the players don't get any extra from it, at least in the NFL, because this is collectively bargained. If you want another game, this means more money and revenue coming in for everybody. Part of that has to go to the players, but Dad, this also does present an opportunity for the players to, unfortunately, the way this always works out, leverage their body for more at the negotiation table. I'm curious for you, as someone that's been through a strike in the NFL, that's been through these kind of situations and labor disagreements before, is there anything that's actually worth it for these NFL players to go through and concede to an 18-game regular season?
Yeah, the biggest thing and the toughest thing for players, and I remember as a young player sitting in the meetings afterward, listening to our player rep talk about what was going on in the union. And when you're a player, you come in at 21, 22 years old, and for the most part, you're playing in your 20s. The average we know is just 3 years, but we get guys playing a little longer now. But a lot of players want what's in it for the now, right? When you start to hear a fight for things, you get a disparity from the guys that have and the guys that make less. I'm not going to say have-nots because you're still making a lot of money. But there's a differing opinion of what you want to accept from the league depending on what your pay is. And a lot of younger guys or guys that make less want the money now. And I think one thing you lose sight of is what happens when you're done playing it. I don't think enough players look at it. Right now you get 5 years of health insurance, right, which is great. But listen, if you make it to the league, you have given up parts of your body that A, aren't going to come back, or B, are going to take a while to come back. So I think one of the big fights that the union should have, and remember the union's responsibility is for the majority, not the minority. And I have always thought, NFL players keep talking about lifetime health insurance. I don't think that's going to happen. But you can get longer than 5 years. You can get 10 years. Can you get 10? Can you get 15 years? That is so important that the 24-year-old doesn't realize when he's 24. Because we all remember when we were 24, we were invincible, right? A guy right next to us in the locker room on the practice field could have blown his knee out or blown his shoulder out, and we'd go, well, that's not going to happen to me. You think you're invincible, and you're not. 12 surgeries later for me, going to need a new shoulder, going to need a new knee. And that's cool. I get it. I signed up for that. I understand it. So I don't think enough players understand how important that could be when they're done playing, to work on that. To me, that's one of the big things. I know players don't like the franchise tag, but how many players did we just say listed? 9? There's, 1,800 players in the NFL? 9 got tagged? I'm not making that the focal point of my battle to say get rid of the franchise tag, because that affects a handful of people every year. That's it. You got to go for something that affects the majority, and it's going to happen. Let me just say this as well. 18 games is going to happen. The league is going to get there. It's going to get to it. So it's a chance for the union to decide what's our best strategy to get something that we're going to negotiate and want.
Yeah, and we saw this could potentially come with caveats, things that people have suggested, because 18 games came up when they were talking about making the switch to 17 games. Would they just kick the door down and go all the way there? And one of the things they brought up potentially with that was the idea that, well, no player could play more than 16 games in that spot, or adding even another bye week to all of this to try and offset some of this. But at the end of the day, it's another game full of hits. It's another thing of that combined with all the Thursday night games, the international games that they're throwing in there now, Dad. There's more stress on players' bodies than ever before. And it's why I think for a lot of people, when we see this inevitability, because I'm with you, this is coming. The owners want this bad enough. We've seen they can make it bad enough because they're much more aligned. There's fewer of them. They've got more money and time on their side than these players who, like you said, there's 2,200 plus. They're all in different places in their career. The average NFL career is 2.5 years, and the guys leading the PA are usually the ones that are on the older side, that are guys that have been around longer. And so the interest varies. So the strength and leverage is always on the side of ownership. But the difficult part in all this, I still think becomes, all right, when you finally make this leap, man, hearing all of this, and then anytime the NFL wants to trot out something as a health and safety measure, that's why it falls on deaf ears with so many people in the players, but certainly in the media who see this and say, you're getting ready to do all of this extra stuff between the travel across the world and then adding more of these games that are going to put these guys at physical injury risk. Please spare me when you trot out your latest health and safety initiative as if you're supposed to expect me to believe you actually care about these guys.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a line that's thrown out that we all chuckle at. But also understand, and you know, you and I both are always going to be players' guys. And players have gotten some things they've wanted, right? Players have gotten a change in the OTAs of when they start. Players have gotten, one of the biggest things is, you know, we talk about games and being hurt in games, but the I guess the hits over and over and over and over again at practice at practice and in training camp and then during the season. And I'm not saying this again back in my day, but I'm just saying as the less hits. Wednesday we were in full pads. Thursday we were in full pads. And by God, when we played in Philly with Buddy Ryan, if we had lost the Sunday before, Friday we were in uppers. And Mike, you know this. If you're in uppers, if you're just in shoulder pads, you're still hitting. So it was at least I'll say 2.5 times a week. You would be hitting every single week of practice during the season. And the players got that taken away, right? And good for them. So it's less hits during the week. You can only have 14 padded practices during the regular season of an 18-week regular season with buys. So there's a lot of weeks where you're not having pads on at all. And in training camp, you can't have successive practices with pads on. So the players have gotten some of the things they've wanted that will take care of your body before the season starts. But I'm with you. You know, the talk of health and safety, a lot of that comes from the lawsuit that the NFL lost with concussions and all that, you know, that they need to talk the game about it. But they're going to get to 18 games. The players have gotten some things that have taken less stress off of them in the offseason and then in training camp and in the regular season with practice. So I think players can do 18 games with the way it's set up now. So I do think it's eventually going to go there. So as a former player, I say, guys, you figure out the best negotiating thing of the list of things you want and the order you want them and see what you can get at the negotiating table in 2030 because I believe this is going to happen. So what will work best for you?
Yeah, I mean, at least you walk in, you know exactly what they want, and you're the thing standing in their way. So there is some power that comes with that. Hopefully how they're able to leverage that works in their favor. Because like you said, we want to see what's best for the players in this and best for the majority of players. And you're right, while the franchise tag gets brought up as this thing that sucks the fun out of free agency right now, right? We look at this, what's coming up next week, and all the big names that are now tied down to the tag where maybe get a trade built in or something like that and all that. It's a lot less fun than these dudes just hitting the open market. I mean, God, if we had these pass rushers like Josh Allen and Brian Burns hitting the open market, if T. Higgins was all of a sudden a true free agent and we got to see these gaudy numbers and maybe the rising tide lifts all ships thing would start to factor into this and help other guys' salary climb, ultimately robbing us of that little bit of fun. pales in comparison to the overall impact that something like healthcare after these guys are done with their playing days would have. And that continues to be the priority. It's the first thing out of most everybody's mouth. We'll see what kind of headway they can make with that coming up here as we look forward towards the future. Coming up next, let's look forward towards the future. We talked about labor in the NFL and professional sports. College might have made a big step in that direction yesterday.
Here on GoJo and Golic, where we're going to discuss some interesting news out of the college basketball world. The Dartmouth men's team is planning to unionize. They voted on Tuesday. They're expected to present a list of demands, which includes potentially a student wage, more medical coverage, and better treatment. We have a statement here from some of the players. They say, "Today is a big day for our team. We stuck together all season and won this election. It is self-evident that we as students can also be both campus workers and union members. Dartmouth seems to be stuck in the past. It's time for the age of amateurism to end." The move is likely months away from impacting other athletic programs as an appeal process works its way through the National Labor Relations Board. Now, guys, this is really an interesting topic to think about what is to come, right? This is sort of the first push, and you'll talk about efforts that have happened in the past, but if this happens, it'll be the first of its kind. So GoJo, break this down a little bit more for us.
Yeah, it's easy to, I think, get lost in the sauce in a lot of this stuff. And for the average fan, I don't know if the minutiae is what's the most interesting part about this, but it's the idea behind it and the fact that, Dad, for the first time, we've had this get to this point. We remember this has been a conversation around Dartmouth men's basketball for a while. This was also a conversation around Northwestern men's football for a little bit that unfortunately didn't get to this point just just because of the way they're positioned in the Big Ten, that's got public schools involved, public versus private, the way you have with Ivy, all leads to this point, though, Dad, where you had players, and we've talked about it on the show. One of my biggest frustrations with what goes on in college sports overall is that the terms of change are dictated to the players with no recourse of their own in that process. This is not a negotiation. It is dictated to them. And for the first time, we have had a group of players get to the point where they could vote on their own outcome and voted in favor of this. And so I think that alone, Dad, that we're seeing so much of the conversation around athletes as employees has taken place at this 3,000-foot level, 30,000-foot level. It's us in the media. It's former players. It's people that have the time, effort, and energy to think about this that aren't going through life as an athlete on a college campus currently themselves. And so for these players to actually take the time to do this, see the merit in it, and vote in favor of this, now to the next step where it's going to get appealed. There's a whole other process in this that's going to make this have months, if not years, before something potentially happens. I do think there is a celebratory point about this because we're seeing players finally amongst themselves deciding to take their own futures into their own hands.
No, I agree. Do I think this is going to be it? I don't know if I believe that, but I believe this is where we're eventually going. We've seen one school at a time. Northwestern try this. Now Dartmouth making it a step further. How far does it go, though? I mean, it's getting out of my league of understanding. If this progresses, we'll certainly bring in people to discuss things like this and where it can go. Because remember, the Ivy League doesn't even give out athletic scholarships, and as the Ivy League, they're saying is, listen, the academics are a priority. So we don't think that the athletes should be employees, of these schools. So we'll see where it leads because I don't think it's going to be one school at a time as we're dealing with NIL going state by state with things going on in Utah right now that eventually we'll talk about. I'm not sure if these one-offs, Mike, are going to succeed, but what they're going to do, I think, is the ball is already rolling a bit for players to be compensated. Now, how far does it go? We've all come up with different thought process of where it might go. Does football separate from the rest of the sports in the NCAA? Are they their own entity, but not necessarily employees, but getting revenue sharing? I don't know where this ends up, but I don't know if it's going to be as employees in forming a union. I know Charlie Baker, the new NCAA president, said in meeting with schools and a student advisory council, I said, we've worked with them, and basically they said we're all in on compensation. We think name, image, and likeness are a great thing, but employment, that's not where we want to land. That's what he's saying at a student advisory council had said. I have no idea.
I'm sure he wouldn't like that because him and everybody else does pretty well in the current system.
He's saying the student athlete advisory council also didn't want that. So he is saying the advisory council that is filled with students is saying that as well. So, of course, he's not going to want it. I don't know where it's going to go. From this individual standpoint, this could be, as you said, years before anything happens. But just like with Northwestern and now with Dartmouth, it's all the bigger picture of where are we eventually going to land. And I think we sometimes see decisions made quicker, like NIL, how quickly it came to be in the transfer portal, but I don't know how quick the next step is going to be, Mike. There is just so much to look at from just football side, compensation side, NIL side, union side. I honestly, if you ask me to pin down to what I think is going to happen, man, I don't think I could give you a solid answer of where this is all going to end up.
I think it all happens sooner than later, just like everything else in college sports right now. When has this freight train looked like it showed any signs of stopping the direction it's going right now?
I agree with you in theory of that, but it's not in, is it now Dartmouth did it? So is it every other Ivy League school has this vote? Then every Big Ten school has this vote?
Well, Dan, I will say to this standpoint, what the Dartmouth guys have talked about is an entire Ivy League players union. They want this to be a group effort there, and I think it would depend on what happened. Again, like, this is all a certain part of the conversation, but I have to remind everybody constantly throughout this, the version of the sport you are about to see for college football, college basketball, and everything else will not be dictated by these young men and women. It's going to be dictated by the television partners. We're watching that play out in real time right now with the way conference realignment has gone down and how much that's changed the sport. The stuff that's going on with the college football playoff right now, already thinking about expanding after it just expanded and didn't even get to the new expansion before thinking about expanding again. People wanting to expand the tournament. All of that is changing the sport enough to where the rest of this is going to adjust around that. But I will say, Dad, to your point, if one voice, it's not about one voice. This is about everything happening all at once, pointed at the NCAA, and the fact that there now seems to be, this is the first and one of the first real tangible signs of desire on the inside for this in an organized way. We've said the most difficult thing, you talked about it with the NFL Players Union, is when you've got a lot of people with varying interests, really hard to get them organized enough to do something to make change against the people that have been in power. The advantage that big-time college football and to some extent big-time college basketball have, but this is mostly a football conversation, is there's no one actually in charge. No one's ever been running this thing. And so if you get a little bit of organization on your side, it's going to go a long way because the other side, well, they don't know how to do this. We've seen them constantly fail at organizing in a meaningful level when it comes to the big-time power brokers in college athletics. So I do think, Dad, when you combine motivated players on the inside now, motivated and organized in these all smart, showing everyone else what's possible to an extent with the fact that, hey, you got people in the media on your side. You got higher courts on your side. You got lawmakers that see easy votes if they are people that are voted into positions of power from their constituency when you're the one helping state you do a little bit better, when you're dunking on the NCAA that's been an easy path towards positive PR for them. I think this is one of those things that starts to show other people, hey, this is how we might get this done. And now each successive generation of player that comes through has a little bit more to work with than those before it and has more people willing to help from the outside to try and make this happen.
I agree. It's just where it ends up, right? I mean, do these schools end up athletes be in a union just in that school and negotiate just for themselves at that school? Does it become a conference thing? I know the NLRB's regional office in Los Angeles is reviewing a case arguing that USC athletes are jointly employed by their school. So is it just USC athletes who try and get deals at USC? Does it become, like I said, a conference thing? Does it become an entire sport thing with football and/or football and basketball? That's where this thing is still so murky and so cloudy. I believe the wheels have started to turn, but it's just a matter of how long these wheels are going to be turning before something substantial is done.
I think, again, like everything else, faster and faster till we get there. And like we've seen with what's going on with NIL and the transfer portal, I think a lot of it is going to be, hey, this is kind of a small section of rules. You guys enjoy figuring this out on your own. And so that becomes the danger in all this. There's a lot in the unknown as we go forward here, but the wheels of change have started, and the folks at Dartmouth men's basketball have been the ones to start the clock on that. Coming up next, we'll get to lies told to us by a college in Texas. Next on GoJo and Golic. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, wherever you get the DraftKings network. Catch the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you get VSiN on the radio. And if you miss any of our great guests live, like Cam Heyward, Pittsburgh Steelers star defensive lineman, who joined us to talk about their offseason and upcoming year, you can check that out wherever you get your podcast or available right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. And let's start off with this. Lies fed to us, quite literally, by Big Jalapeno. Disturbing information profiled in D Magazine, not D's Magazine, but D Magazine, a publication based in Dallas. There has been, quote, a vast industrial scheme that's led to milder jalapenos. If you've been wondering, man, these jalapeno poppers really aren't popping quite the way they used to, it's because a change was made. The culprit is a new variety of pepper called the Tam 2, which in its 2 decades of existence has become the most popular across processing. See, the vast majority of jalapenos end up in processing plants using stuff like salsas and things like that want a more steady and reliable heat to their jalapeno heat based on weather, based on stress, all these different things. And the culprit is the minds at Texas A&M. The Ag School is the one that cooked up this much milder jalapeno that's now become pretty ubiquitous across the industry. I don't know, Claudia, are you much into the heat when it comes to food? Have you felt the sting or lack thereof in new jalapenos?
I was going to say I actually hate all things spicy.
Really? Okay.
The only thing I know, Senior, I got to stop with the food taste because I'm pretty sure Senior's hated every single one I've ever given. But I do feel for you people. Like, my mom loves spicy food. She's probably pissed off about this. I loved the comment that was up there, the first comment underneath this article, pathetic. One just like the only word that comes to mind, pathetic, which I get it. If you want spicy food, you want the spiciness. So it is wrong, despite the fact that I don't like spicy. Sorry, Senior.
Yeah. Listen, it definitely is. And Claudia, I don't know what to say about the disappointment I feel yet again.
Darn it.
Somehow we're going to work through this, though. We're going to find some common ground on a food at some point. But you know what? This is kind of like, Mike, getting lied to when you're expecting a little more sizzle than you get. It's some of the brands, whether it's candy bars or whether it's pastries out there, the packaged ones that you buy, all of a sudden you buy it and you're like, you know what? This looks a little smaller. It's like they just start to shrink it a little bit on you, charge you more for it, but try and make it a little smaller.
Oh, it's like the bag of chips.
So
It's only got like 60% full of chips and a bunch of air.
I was going to say that. You're basically buying air.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I think this is just another thing in the long line of us as the consumers being taken advantage of, and really nothing we can do about it unless you just flat out don't want to buy the product.
Well, it's deceit. This is out and out deceit. We didn't even know we were being fed milder jalapenos.
So does this mean we're boycotting jalapenos with Johnny Manziel?
We're boycotting jalapenos until Reggie Bush gets his Heisman back. That's how we stick it to both the NCAA and Texas A&M for feeding us weak jalapenos. As someone put in the article, the Aggies literally took the spice out of life. How dare you? You should be ashamed of yourselves for that. All that money down there and no sense when it comes to jalapenos selling us out here. Speaking of money, Claudia, let's get to that. This is an interesting time in baseball as we've seen the Oakland A's preparing for a big move to Las Vegas, and with a big move comes new stadiums, and that's where the fun starts.
And the new stadium looks awesome. We're going to throw the picture up so you can see it. If you're listening, please go look at it. And of course, these are the plans in Vegas, but it looks really nice, I thought. But they turned off the comments because clearly they weren't liking what people were saying.
So this is always tough. Obviously, team moves like this are always complicated. There's all the local politics of it where everyone in Oakland, I'm sure, feels some type of way about the way that this is positioned.
Sure.
And I feel for everybody involved. That's why I rarely get involved in all of these dilemmas when it comes to team moving. That being said, Dad, I don't know about you. I am a sucker for artist renderings and architectural renderings of new stadiums. I think they all look awesome. I understand some people like to dunk on them. This one looks like if the Sydney Opera House and SoFi Stadium had a baby, they would birth this for the Athletics. And to me, Dad, it's almost like when you see a new movie trailer or when a quarterback has a pro day before they go to the NFL. if you can't make a banger off this, like these hit every time for me, and if you can't make a banger off this, then your product is truly mid. Like if you've got a bad movie trailer, if you can't give me a minute and a half of the goods to try and get me hooked on this, that's a you problem and a huge indictment of your movie. Much the same way when people do these artist renderings, I should be eating out of the palm of your hand. I feel like I'm in 2034 in that stadium right now, which I realize is actually only a decade away and not nearly as far as 2034 used to be away. So that hurt a little bit more than I was anticipating.
Yeah. Yeah, that did. Well done. Okay. So, do you like this? I mean, yes. I like it.
It's sick.
I like it a lot. I mean, I'm just amazed. This happens every year, too, when teams try different uniforms. I dig the effort, man, because I know a lot of times players get to keep those uniforms. I kind of like that. I like these drawings. I like being a little bit different. I think it's a good-looking stadium.
Well, the only person it was a tough look for was Oakland A's player Brent Rooker, who was seen up on the board. So inside, you can see up on the board there, it lists a potential lineup on the weird indoor Jumbotron screen they have. And you see Rooker, their right fielder, listed up on there with his hypothetical batting average for some year to come where they would be in Las Vegas in this stadium. And Foolish Baseball on Twitter tweeted, "This render is completely unrealistic. I like Brent Rooker, but there's no way he profiles as a 303 hitter." As Brooker responded, "I'm just trying to here enjoying my day off, catching strays because of a hypothetical baseball rendering." So tough looking, tough scene for Brent Rooker in that situation, even if the Jumbotron slaps. That's how weird. That's probably why they started turning off the comments.
That is probably why stuff
Save
like
the
that.
players.
People are mean, man. Come on, just let them live in the future with a 303.
Yeah, assume the best in Brent Rooker right now. Assume that he might grow and develop into someone capable of doing these kind of things. Shame on them for that, but yeah, I'm with you, Dan. I think this looks sick. I think most new stadium renderings look pretty great. Hell, we've been inside some of the new ones. Again, I get the complications that come from them, but if you've been inside SoFi or any of these new stadiums, they slap. They're really cool. I've enjoyed being inside them. I like the indoor-outdoor thing. As a big guy, an indoor-outdoor stadium is perfect because I'm not getting wet. I get a little bit of a cross breeze in there. It's nice. It cools down my innards.
I feel like that's everybody,
I agree.
Not just big guys, but yeah.
It's a fair point.
Well, as big guys, we tend to sweat a little quicker than everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. While I'm a reformed fat, I still have a fat heart and cooling system, and so all of that leads to a lot more sweat. We don't need to get into that. Instead, let's get to two big guys that also made a scene at a pretty interesting game and a great win for the Cleveland Cavaliers last night.
They did, yeah. It was weird to see them decked out in Cav stuff, but they are natives of Cleveland, so they were there for the game against the Celtics. And I guess that was the method to the madness because that snapped the Celtics' 11-game win streak. Despite them being up by 22 in the fourth, the Cavs still took over. It has to be them, right? Bobblehead night for the two, chugging beers as they do. The only thing that they shouldn't have done was give one of those to Shaq.
Be very careful.
Shaq, the other one got Reebok.
So, oh yeah, that's nice.
What do you think of Travis's hair?
Nice.
That's the Kelce.
It's the Kelce now?
That's supposed to be a fade.
Okay. I'm like, they made it different colors. It's nice.
He even got the little gold chain.
What? Did you break it?
Shaq. Shaq said, this ain't no damn Reeboks.
Jeez, man, we can't even have nice stuff around here. You just ripped Jason Kelce off?
That's the Dr. Shocks. This ain't no damn Reeboks.
So the Jason and Travis Kelce bobblehead night at the Cavaliers game, where like Claudia said, they get a great win there. You see the two of them deleting beers down courtside. Jason Kelce's recently retired and loving it. They're both representing Cleveland Heights High School there. I saw them pull out the football shirt as well. But Shaq, it's a reminder, Dad, Shaq is too big to have fun. That was a joined bobblehead that he just snapped in half purely by existing. Shaq didn't do anything wild in that video. He just exists, but he's too big to have fun at any point.
I want to ask you, when they stood up to chug their beers, you know everybody was watching, you know it was going to be on the big screen, and you know if you're in that position, that's going to be all over social media and TV everywhere. How confident are you in your beer chugging capabilities to stand up and say, yeah, I am fine for the world to see this?
Oh, not confident at all. I got acid reflux, baby. That's going to go to hell in a handbasket. That's the one thing I didn't hit. Well, two things. I didn't inherit your hair or your beer chugging ability because I know this is right up your alley.
Oh, I would be on that just so quickly, just saying this is going to get some good reviews.
There you go. Well, someone bring my dad into your building to chug beers on the Jumbotron. And while you're there, download, subscribe, rate, review us. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.